This is the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics. Let's listen to host Chris Saxman explore the personalities and policies that connect the Commonwealth. The VIP Podcast is brought to you by the VCTA, Broadband Association of Virginia, and Virginia Free. The views and opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the VCTA and Virginia Free or our sponsors.
All right, this is Chris Saxman on the VIP Podcast, Virginia in Politics Podcast, brought to you by VCTA, the Broadband Association of Virginia and Virginia Free, of which I am the Executive Director, a nonpartisan, nonprofit, pro-business organization here in Virginia since 1988. And joining me now, after that long-winded introduction of myself in this program, is Susan Swecker, the chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia. Susan, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Chris. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, what most people don't understand about politics in Virginia is that it happens every day. And we've been doing this daily now for the last 30 years, you and I, and we date back to we don't date back, we go back.
That's how rumors get started.
That's right. I always love that. Did you hear this? Is there a rumor? I always love when people call me, is there a rumor going around about this? I'm like, yeah, there is a rumor going around about this. It's still a rumor. There's nothing validity to it. But you've been, we've been involved in politics, you and I, since my early days in 1992 back in the Shenandoah Valley. And part of my district was Highland County, and you're from Highland County. How does Susan Swecker from Highland County become chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia for so many years and be so successful at it? How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Unclear, I'm not sure. But can I just say something real quick first?
Yeah, sure.
Like, our families have known each other way before you ever ran for office or anything like that. So it's really neat that we had a relationship going back. I was close friends with your mother, and God bless her soul, and I miss her a lot. But I just think our relation, it's because people will say in this hyper partisan atmosphere now, like, how can you talk to that person? Who is that? Blah blah blah. And I'm like,
why would you not?
He's my buddy.
Right.
He's my buddy. But you're right, and you did such great work for Highland County. I know you have a family home there too, and really got to know the folks. And we feel like you're one of ours. So
I do.
You're in office or you're not.
Yeah, no. Every election night, the night before the election, I would go to the farm in Highland and wake up and go to the polling precincts in Highland County, and I would walk into one in Bluegrass, and they're like, "What are you doing here? Yep. This is Bluegrass." I'm like, "I want to say thank you for you being here at 6 o'clock in the morning to man the polls."
And that meant something.
And that meant something because they're like, "Yeah, it does. This is volunteer work, but we do this because we love our country."
Yeah.
And and that's one of the things I love about where we came from.
Well, and they're very proud. I mean, they have one of the highest turnout rates every year. I mean, just consistently. Yeah. But I would say, how'd you get
Highland
here?
County? I mean, what got you into politics? And let's start with that.
I've thought about that a lot, and I think we were in a family that just talked about politics. Of course, when I was growing up, at first I wanted to be a journalist. That's what I thought I wanted to be. But I read an article in Newsweek, which I got out of the public library. We didn't, not in our school library. We didn't have a public library then, believe it or not. And they did say, there's this new degree coming up. It's called political science. So that kind of sparked me. But also, I remember watching. I was an Robert Kennedy follower as a young kid, and it gutted our whole family when he was assassinated. Right. And I remember going up to our neighbors, the Puffenbargers, the Sugar Orchard people. They were our friends and still are, and they had the color TV. We watched Robert Kennedy's funeral service at their home because they had the color TV. Ours was just black and white. And I don't know, I really think way back in those days, there was just something there. He was so inspiring to young people, and that call to action and that call to service, that I always was interested in politics. But still, I'm a kid in a rural area like that. How do you get involved? But my family talked about it. It was something we just talked about all the time. And then I just kind of got really interested in it. And when I went to Mary Baldwin, I was kind of the kid that hung around the headquarters.
Okay.
Started volunteering and showing up, and
it was a form of socialization for you.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a connecting point for you.
And I was really lucky in that I got embraced by a whole lot of people that meant a lot to me, but have maintained and have longtime friendships with them today. So they pretty scooped me up, brought me in, and there was a special election after the 1970 I really date myself now, but the year that Marshall Coleman won Attorney General, he had been state senator.
Was it 77?
7, I believe.
Okay.
And Frank Nolan, who he had beaten for the state senate, came back and ran and won state senate. And Frank asked me to go to Richmond to be his legislative aide. And I was
really?
like, whoa, this is huge.
That's a big, okay. Now I'm catching up to the timeline here, but let's talk about that early, those moments with RFK, because what people lose in the timeline of 1968 was the fact that Johnson was very unpopular, running for re-election, was starting to get challenged in the primaries, and I think it was New Hampshire when Bobby Kennedy got in, and it was like March. It was like, but I think it was later in the cycle than it would be today.
Oh, much later.
But
no one started anything till
ground shot kind of stuff, because obviously the legacy of JFK and RFK in the '60s, and then April Martin Luther King gets shot. And then Bobby Kennedy gets shot in June in Los Angeles. And that was a revolutionary time in America. This is leading into the convention in Chicago. But what was it about was it the idealism of Bobby Kennedy, or the turn away from Johnson and the negativity of Vietnam? What was it?
Right, I was going to say, so you also had the Vietnam, you had, a lot of, just division in our country that was like, and again, you just remember, I'm in a rural county, and I'm following it from afar. I'm in a rural county that had one black couple, that were very, very white, and I'm following this, from afar. I'm not in the middle of it. Even you, Chris, in Stanton or something, like, you see a little bit more of it, right?
But the Valley, what people don't understand about the Valley is that the Mountain Valley Republicans, a far more moderate branch of the Republican Party, that part of Virginia and that part of the South didn't have the racial unrest that the eastern part did, and we didn't have the plantations. We were small, itinerant farmers. We took care of ourselves, very independent-minded.
Remember the movie Shenandoah, where Jimmy Stewart was...
the Scotch-Irish who populated the Shenandoah Valley, they're a very independent group of people, and that's deeply embedded in our soul. We're an independent group.
Yeah.
Even though we're Democrat, Republican, within our own ranks, we're pretty independent-minded.
Yes.
That goes back to those roots in the Valley.
Agreed. And I think, for me, my parents were big JFK people, and I remember, and I bet your mama did too, but I remember, my mother dressing like Jackie Kennedy and, having the pillbox hat and, and they all, I just.
Well, they were iconic.
Yes, right?
They were instantly iconic.
They were a young couple, right?
But they were instantly iconic. And that's hard to wrap your head around, that these people, icons are built over time. The Kennedys and Jackie O were like that. Yeah. And they like reset the entire country.
Yeah, I agree. And then, I was fairly young when JFK was assassinated, but again, you're around, your parents, follow it.
Sure.
But then Robert, there was just something about to me, he was inspiring to young people. Like that was, he had that hair, with a tousled hair, that energy, all those pack of kids. I mean,
was different. He was closer to you in age anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You could identify with him.
Yeah.
Was that? We're talking about political identity these days. Is that a form of political identity when you can look at someone who's closer in age? Of course, I more closely align myself with them because I'm closer to them in age than a Lyndon Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just think people, it was a very divided time. I mean, I think LBJ did a lot of good, but the Vietnam War just, he couldn't get out of that, and he didn't, he inherited some of that too, and had bad advice. But like, he did look, I look at him now, and he died when he was 65, but he looked older than.
Isn't that
right?
amazing when you think about when Lyndon Johnson died, how young he really was by today's standards?
And I mean, even in our
I'm struck by that because he does not look 65 in today's 65.
Correct.
And that was that a further distancing from you and the older generation? Because that was really the counterculture at the time, the 60s, was this turn from the past and the division of the moment going, we got to do something else. We've got to branch out and seek that better.
Yeah, and I just think it was just, like you said, it was soul crushing that summer, 68, spring and summer, with Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. And as, a young, almost teenager, you're going, kind of scared about what the world's going to come and what's going to happen. Kind of like you are now.
Well, okay, let's talk. And that's one of the reasons I enjoyed teaching history so much, is that you can make history relevant to today. And when you're teaching high school kids and you're trying to get them excited about the 17th century, you have to come up with something. right? And you have to say, here are people's stories, and why it's relevant today is because what they experience exactly what you're experiencing, and they kind of go, how is this the same thing? And you explain, they go like, oh my gosh, I get it now. So let's talk about the division today in our country. We are deeply divided. Even within our own parties, there are deep divisions growing.
Yeah.
Talk about that in the Democratic Party and how you're able to, I don't want to say maintain control, but maintain balance and effectiveness in the Democratic Party in Virginia as it's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, the Virginia itself, the landscape has changed, and I think it took us all a little bit by surprise in 2017 with the almost taking back the House of Delegates. But I think that one of the things, and we are deeply divided. I mean, everybody has an opinion, and it seems like people are much more angry about everything and have a lot of angst, and that opportunity. I grew up, again, like the time I came down here, those years, young years as a legislative aide, I wish I'd appreciated them more. I look back on it now because I was at the seat of, and allowed to sit at the seat of a whole lot and watch a lot of legislation being made and stories being told. And the Democrats and Republicans, there was a lot of camaraderie. There was a lot of socialization. You went to dinner together. Lay aides were often, receptions aides were often invited along. You might fought during the day, but it was sort of like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. They fought like cats and dogs, but then President Reagan would have Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, over for a drink afterwards. Right. I mean, it was that. It was fair. It was that. It wasn't this sort of.
Where have we lost that? Where have we lost that? Why did
honestly,
we lose that?
I think social network has had a lot to do with that, because you can
social media,
you can sit on whatever platform you're on, say whatever you want about somebody that you would never ever dare say to their face. And I think another sad component is our Capitol Press Corps, decimation of that all across the country. If you look at where we were, let's say when Mark Early ran the statewide in 2001, if we would have had that kind of robust press corps, Glenn Youngkin would have had to talk to the press. He wouldn't have gotten by with hiding out or just going on Fox News and talking to right wing.
Bob Melton would never have.
You got that right.
And it would have mattered.
But it does matter.
When I talk to Republican operatives now, they're like, what do I care what's in the Washington Post and Richmond Times-Dispatch? Our voters don't read it.
And they are right. They are correct. So we're all only talking to our own people,
right?
Whether it's Fox News or MSNBC or whatever venue. And I honestly don't listen. Somebody says you got to listen to them all. That's what Mark Warner listen to them all. And I don't listen to any of them. I just want to make up my own mind. I want Walter Cronkite back. I know those are the old days that are not going to come back, but give me the news.
But I mean, obviously Cronkite's going to come back, but people who can bridge that divide are absolutely critically important to our health as a republic. And,
correct.
I mean, when I see, and I'm not going to turn guns here on the left, but recent examples, and the right does this too. We eat our own, but the left's current buffet is composed of Whoopi Goldberg and Joe Rogan, and they are people of the left. I mean, Joe Rogan was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Whoopi Goldberg, said really dumb things, just ill-informed things, and apologized, and is still suspended for 2 weeks. I think that's abhorrent.
Well, I also think let's get to what's important too. I mean, we've got big issues out there and big things that are important to families all across Virginia and all across this country. And we do, I just think we spend too much time, both sides, on the culture wars.
Absolutely,
we about
always
what we
have.
can,
But
that's because that's divisive, and that makes money for networks. It makes money for consultants.
Let's not go there.
Yeah.
But my point is, what is this fascination we have with social media and the internet and not talking to one another, just not even across the divide, but to our fellow man on the street, in the elevator, on the street corner, and just having, just being human.
Basic courtesy.
Basic courtesy.
Yeah. And it happened very swiftly. It seems like to me that we went to that place. Now look, I know everybody gets tired talking about Donald Trump, but I think he was an impetus for a lot of it that was simmering out there. All of this
was
division.
He the impetus, or just the final?
Maybe
catalyst?
the final lit the fire that really.
I mean, it was a rolling simmer.
Correct.
Before that, and then they went to 10 on the gas on that one, and it just went.
He validated it to a lot of people and made it okay. And to me, that's heartbreaking. It's been personally heartbreaking for me, Chris, because it has, I've been estranged from some of my family now as a result of all of this, and a lot of thought of being harassed and trolled and on social media, and it's painful.
Now I've lost friends.
Mental health is not worth it. Yeah,
not like
exactly.
friends on Facebook, friends, but
real friends.
Real friends you grew up with, came of age together, and they unfriend you on social media. You're like, dude, what's the problem?
Right.
I mean, do you know what we went through together? And you don't even call?
Yeah.
You just assume that all the conversations we had growing up have no merit today, have no validity in our conversation and our relationship. But we so identify with these political binary realities, and even though you share one of those elements, it's still unhealthy.
Well, I mean, I subscribe to that, theory of, and it was something President Clinton, used to say, I can't word it like he did, but it was like basically, I have my opinions, but I'm not mad at anybody.
Right.
And so I just think that touch is kind of.
Are we getting angrier as a people? Angrier?
Well, let me just say, I think this is an opportunity where this new governor, Glenn Youngkin, he says he wants to be a uniter. So let me give you an example on that. But you can't be a uniter and then talk about CRT as something. And I don't want to get into like CRT exists or not, but we know it doesn't exist. And divisive concepts taught in schools.
Whether it exists or not, or whether it's taught in schools, or whether it's implemented as a management strategy, are all different constructs. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you want to be a uniter, then you don't start out on day one issuing executive orders that are divisive. You don't I'm just trying to figure out which one he is. Right. So, but he has an opportunity. He has a real opportunity here. Right. So are you the affable, vest-wearing, basketball-bouncing fella that people voted for, 55% electoral, high turnout, or are you the guy that really just goes on to Fox News and John Fredericks and, plays to your far right wing of the party? We need leaders running the country, running states that will represent everybody, not just fringe elements.
Sure. And I guess in that frame of a conversation, and we all see political leaders, because we only have two parties essentially in this country, it's easy to go, see, your guy's doing it poorly. But when our guy does it poorly, we're not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And one of the great faults in our society, in our political system, is the inability or the lack of fortitude to call out our own. And that, I think, would be a far healthier construct politically. If we were to say, look, you just can't talk to someone like that. You just can't say these things. You can, but you shouldn't be allowed to. It's inappropriate. And really, I don't think we have the wherewithal as a society anymore to back that up, because everyone turns and feasts on them. Like the point I brought up, and again, it's not directed at the left per se, but when you turn on Whoopi Goldberg or Joe Rogan, who, and I've been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast with Robert Malone, and I'm going, okay.
I don't even know. I never knew who Joe Rogan was until this all happened, but okay.
I might have listened to a couple of podcasts, but now I downloaded Spotify. I'm like, if someone's this upset, it must be interesting. I mean, I want to be a part of the conversation. But I look at and I listen to the podcast, I'm like, why are people trying to cancel this guy? Why are people trying to cancel Whoopi Goldberg? And Republicans do it to their own too. Yeah. I mean, you're a rhino if you don't support Donald Trump on everything all the time. That's insane. We don't do that with our own family members. We don't support that, to your point.
Yeah.
We're not going to be in lockstep with our own family members.
Right.
And people are now turning against their own family members on a political basis. Like, they can't have a conversation with people they literally grew up with, share the same DNA, and have all the holiday,
Right. Shared a lot of,
great, wonderful parts of our being.
Correct.
How do we turn that?
Yeah. I mean, again.
Do you agree we need to turn it, first of all? I
think we have to turn it. I think our democracy depends on us turning it.
Yeah.
Because it weakens us as a country and stabilizes us. And I think that we still are in very perilous times. And I think it's incumbent on any of us that have a microphone or a leadership role to try to work towards that. I have always tried to be fair in everything that I have done, and honest, and I think you have too. Like, we approach things that way, and I think we all have to just do our part. But I do think, and look, I think a lot of it comes from Congress and across the Potomac, and we were slower to be nationalized, but we've been now, but a lot of it comes from there. And if it's just like, I'm not going to vote for this because it's. because one party put it up or another. I mean,
Right.
we're never. I mean, it's not healthy.
It's just not healthy.
Weakens us as a country.
Right. And at the end of the day, when we finally, because I've been talking to, I guess the inauguration, you see a lot of the former governors. You go, and when they are able to step back, and I had breakfast with Bill Howell yesterday up in the former Speaker of the House up in Fredericksburg with Michelle, and we were up there shopping, we had breakfast. And that step back and the step back from the step back, you start realizing what's really important.
Right.
And what we were doing here while we're involved in politics and how you behave before and after, you realize that might not have been my best self during those times. And upon reflection, if I were to say to the next generation, you really should do this, what would you say to the legislative aides today who are watching this or listening to this, who might someday be Democratic Party chair in decades to come? How should they behave, and what should they look out for the health of the republic as well as the party?
I would say get to know your colleagues, not based on party, but just get to know your colleagues a little bit about them. Find out how do you have a common ground? Do you like the same sports team? Do you, did you grow up in the same area? I mean, what is we all have some commonality there that we can agree on. And not everybody is a green-eyed monster. No,
let's talk about that, since I know you brought in Jake here. And one of the things that Jake and I have bonded over the years, he was communications director, I think, for Terry McAuliffe, was the fact we're both from Pittsburgh, we're both Steeler fans, because they're the best team in the country ever. Sorry, Bengals people. When you win one, get back to us. Then we'll compare notes. So let's talk about Susan Swecker, and what kind of TV shows do you like? Who are you? And when you go home and kick off your heels and pour a glass of wine or something even better, what do you like to watch?
So I will tell you one funny fact that nobody will ever guess about me if they already didn't know. Our whole family is we have 4 generations that have watched The Young and the Restless. Soap opera.
Nope, not on my radar screen.
We are so and so that's kind of just a fun fact. But I like it. I just finished watching the final half season of Ozark. I like that.
Okay, you like Ozark.
That's kind of stuff. But the other thing in the pandemic that actually it was Dorothy McAuliffe that I had to watch. It was in the beginning of lockdown was Schitt's Creek. I like stuff that's funny. Especially that's my kids love that show. Yeah.
After it got a little pedantic for me. It's like, okay, we get it. You can't just do too much here when you're in a hotel like this. But it's funny.
Yeah, it's really funny. But I like in the roles we have and stuff. I really like to relax and watch stuff that's like you don't have to think a whole lot about.
Yeah.
Although I like all the Law and Order series.
Okay.
They're sort of my go-tos as well. I mean, they've stood the test of time.
Well, that's the fun part, isn't it? What are your favorite movies that have stood your test of time? What do you go back to?
Again, stupid stuff. Like every year, our family watches Chevy Chase Christmas Vacation.
Okay.
That's been on the list since forever. The book and also the movie To Kill a Mockingbird was very, very important as a young person.
Did that lead to your involvement politically?
No, I can't say that I tied it.
You didn't see Atticus Finch and Bobby Kennedy as being the same person?
But not maybe subconsciously, but yeah. But I read a lot, and then for like relaxation and stuff, I read like a lot of stuff like John Grisham, one of my favorite people. Anyway,
okay. Well, yeah.
One of our good Democrats. I think his stuff is always good. David Baldacci is always good.
Okay.
I like the Virginia people. I kind of mix it up. I've got 2 books now. Oh, one, it's Harold Don Reed's book on the music of the Statler Brothers.
No kidding.
Yeah, I just got it. And then
we'll plug in for Don Reed, a friend of our family for many years.
And then I've got another one. So I try to mix up, from a guy named John Delavolpe. You might know him. He's got a book out about Gen Xers and the pressures that they are under, and how and millennials and how they're compared to other generations. But story about John Delavolpe is he's at Harvard now, running the polling stuff there. He was a Biden pollster.
Okay. I
gave him his first political job.
Come on.
In 1989. I got a call from somebody that I had known and said, I got a young man who wants to get involved in politics. And I was helping then Watkins Abbott, then a Democrat. And I was in law school and I was consulting. And I sent him down to Appomattox, where he lived with the Abbott family and ran that campaign, and now he's big and famous. So I'm very proud of him.
Well, it sounds like you do a lot of reading. How much of your entertainment is reading versus watching?
You know what? The pandemic put me into watching more than reading, and I'm trying to get back to reading now. There was just something about that lockdown thing that, was hard to focus. So it was easier to just, It's an
interesting perspective. Yeah. What about favorite sports teams?
Well, I used to love the Washington, whatever we call them. And then it's just the owner. It just kind of we were always big Washington fans growing up and everything. And I had season tickets at one point and everything, but I just hated the way. I'm not a fan of Dan Snyder. I don't want to say that. He might give me money. I don't know. I want to
Well, he does have a stadium deal before the legislature this year. Have you been briefed on the stadium proposals?
No,
legislation around it?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't.
Would you like to see them come to Virginia?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's done the right way, that's all. I'll leave that up to a lot smarter people than me. But sure, I'd like to see it. I mean, look, I love the old days of we were all that was our weekends. Was you'd go to church and you'd come home and you'd either have lunch and watch the game or watch the game and you'd get a snack or whatever. That was our family time.
Yeah, that was for a Steelers fan in the Shenandoah Valley. It was hard because every Sunday the Redskins were on. We're like, I don't want to watch the Redskins because I'm not a Redskins fan. Yeah. But
of course, I'm a big Virginia Tech fan. Sweckers are pretty big Virginia Tech people, so we follow that. Yeah.
You're looking forward to your first national championship, are you?
Yeah. Hope remains, right?
See, like a Bengals fan over here. He's got hope. So college sports, any other sports you follow? Basketball, baseball?
Kind of randomly here and there, but nothing that really. Always watch the Olympics. Always enjoy that. Yeah, as much as I can. Right. As much as you can.
It's a busy time of year.
Yeah. Okay. But it's fun. It's fun to see.
Well, let's talk about briefly, then we get to the Democratic Party of Virginia and how much time you have left. But your role as chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia, 7 years in, substantial staff, operations, you've been moving along. You lost an election there. Can't put it on anyone in Virginia Democrats so much. A lot of it is driven by the national narrative. Let's just be honest. You said earlier on, our politics has been nationalized, and so too our state and local elections are going to be nationalized. Where do you see the Democratic Party changing as a result of the results of 2021?
Chris, when I came in as party chair, which was March of 2015, seems like many lifetimes ago, but we were not in a position where we were financially stable. We relied on the governor's PAC, Governor McAuliffe then, to help subsidize us, and that had sort of been the trend over those some years. And one of my goals was to get us up in a financially stable position. We sold the headquarters down in Chaco Slip. That was never really great, opening and welcoming place anyway for volunteers. And we moved up here across the street to the SunTrust building, and we hired a team that we began a very robust fundraising program, to which we have been, I'd say 6 months in, to that. On our own, where we created an organization that people had confidence in, donors had confidence in, and that my goal had always been that we had the infrastructure in place to stand the test of time, so that we weren't dependent on one election cycle to another.
Because when you get behind the Virginia elections, you don't catch up.
Correct.
That's a hard catch up.
Correct. So as hard and painful as last November was, and it was, we at least have the infrastructure in place to keep moving and keep going. And that's something that I'm very, very proud of. I mean, we have 15 staff members
15
that do really important things. I have a good big 2-person political shop. I have a 2-person digital, which is, I don't know, when I came in, digital wasn't even fun, all of that was not a thing. Now it's a whole separate important piece of it.
Because the news media, you got to make your own news. You got to make your own stories.
Your own news, but it's also a big piece of your fundraising component too.
Sure.
And being creative on that. But we have a voter protection department. That was something I hired the first voter protection director for a state party in the country.
Now, what is that? What is voter protection?
So it takes, and it comes and goes, the size, but it's basically working with all over the state, working with local electoral boards, registrar's office, your party leaders, to make sure that you know what's going on the ground, to make sure that voting is open and accessible. We worked over these last years when we had the trifecta to come up with ideas. Sunday voting was one of the ideas that we had that Delegate Bagby put in and passed last year as local option. And so some localities were able to have Sunday souls to the polls. But, a lot of the things, the 45-day absentee window, a lot of things we worked very hand in glove with our leaders on to make voting more open and accessible, and something I'm very, very proud of. And kind of confused about why Republicans want to roll it back, since I actually think it helped them win this election last year.
I've been curious myself, and having, sort of not in the party machinery anymore. I look back and I see these bills coming in, I'm like, okay, rather than getting involved in what's, the Democrats want this and Republicans want that, like what's a realistic restriction, or should there be any restrictions on voting? And what are reasonable policies to go, yeah, that makes sense because I mean, look, if you have a 45-day window for absentee early voting, okay, fine. Is 44 out of the question, or is 46 the right number? Is it 30? Because I think, Democrats might go, well, based on what happened in this last election, we could go to 60 because we get a lot of votes in before the debate happens in Northern Virginia. We're a lot better off. And so really, is there an ideological underpinning to any of this? I don't think there is.
I don't think there is, because I think the thing in 20 was that Donald Trump went out and told people not to go do it, not to vote early, to vote on election day. And he kind of undercut with Republicans, or which
is politically, as you know, not smart.
No, and Glenn Youngkin's campaign embraced it and had a plan and worked with it. And so while we won early vote, we didn't win it by the margin that we did before. So just go ahead and make it part of your routine of what we do.
Right.
And then everybody's better off.
Right. But
I can't get into whether it's 30, 45.
I'm just curious. Is there a legitimate reason to say 45 is too much and 30 is too little? Is there?
I'm not into
I look at it
nuances.
You look at from a policy standpoint. I just don't get what the problem is in saying, if we go back, because one of the things that happened in the pandemic is we're going to blow it wide open, make sure we get enough ballots out there as possible. And now if we do anything else like that, you're restricting ballot access, which is hogwash. It's just hogwash, because we were in a pandemic and it was extraordinary circumstances. And now if you reset the game on that and everything else we did in regulatory relief, then reset the game. Doesn't even work. So my point is, what is legitimate when it comes to these kind of decisions?
Well, I think you have to be, you have to look at something and they go, well, mail-in, there's fraud, there's not fraud. Well, Utah, a really, really red state, has all mail-in, and they don't have a problem. No. So again, not every, let's look at it reasonably. And I think we did really good things in a tough time, because you were in the pandemic and there were a lot of people who really didn't want to go in person to vote. So we tried to make it as easy as possible for people to vote and have that opportunity, because you don't want anybody denied that opportunity.
No, I don't think and look, the Republicans won with a higher turnout this year.
And again, up until that point, you would have said, and I would have said, high turnout is better for Democrats.
And yet,
except this time.
Not except this time. The Republicans adapted to the reality of the marketplace and said, let's just get our people out early and we'll model from there. And they were very successful.
You know what? And again, that's what I'm saying. I can't argue against that, because that's good for democracy.
Sure.
You let any more people vote. Again, that's an incredibly high turnout.
Yeah, because I remember some of them in Southwest Virginia said, if they want a ballot harvest, we'll harvest ballots. Let's do that.
As long as it was,
and again, I think,
and they say those words. I'm not even.
Tricky.
I know, but Chris, people say those words. I don't even think they know what they mean half the time.
Well, they don't have to if it's.
Does that mean you're going out to the cemetery and get the old 9th district vote early in Austin?
That's never happened in our nation's history. But the reality is, the words have consequences. Phrases have consequences, and bumper sticker phrases have electoral impact.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's important, incumbent upon people like yourself, myself, to engage it and go, wait a second here. Let's call out our own and say, that's just not exactly accurate. Let's not say that if you go from 45 days early voting to 42, that you're limiting access to the ballot, because I don't think that's that big of a deal. Going back to a week out, you can make a legitimate case that you're restricting access to the ballot. And there's a balance in between all this, and I don't want to get lost on that. But I think in this whole conversation, we've lost sense of, especially in the pandemic, a sense of reality and common sense. Like, can we agree on these basic principles? Because at the end of the day, the people who argue about these the most are not impacted by them.
Correct.
It's the people in these buildings who, if legislators were concerned about redistricting as much as they were other people's jobs, we'd have a whole different economy. Don't answer that. No.
Well, I don't even want to talk about redistricting. I'll still have a lot of bitterness from the commission, the redistricting, passage of the redistricting commission.
And yet here we are.
And here we are. That's the reality.
Look, that's part of the democratic process.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
But Susan Swecker, Chair of the Democratic Party of Virginia, thanks for coming on the VIP podcast. Congratulations, you too are now a VIP.
I am. Thank you for having me, and I'll either see you back here or I'll see you in Allen County.
I'm sure, hopefully. Especially during Maple season.
Yeah.
When is Maple Festival? 2 weeks?
I don't think I can go this year. It's in March. So
Are they having it this year?
Yeah, they are having it. So
go to the Maple Festival in Highland County this year. It's open for 2 weekends, and hopefully, I think in March. They're usually around the ACC tournament.
You're exactly right.
That's how I always pegged it. Thanks for joining us, Chris Saxman, here at the VIP Podcast. Thanks for joining us.